All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating and frankly incredibly detailed 14-point strategic thesis. According to this analysis of recent geopolitical events, the source argues that Iran has essentially waged and won an asymmetric shadow war. Now, we're leaving the politics at the door for this explainer. We're just going to impartially map out the exact strategies, the economics, and the deeply long-term planning laid out in the source material, just to see exactly how this complex global chessboard actually works. To make this dense analysis a bit easier to digest, we've organized the source's 14 points into 6 main macro strategies: the April 13th attack, economic attrition, proxy networks, diplomatic alliances, public perception, and finally, time as a weapon.
So, starting with part 1, the diplomatic message of April 13.
The analysis kicks off with the dramatic events from the night of April 13, 2024. Over 300 drones and missiles fired directly at Israel. But here's the catch. According to the source, this was never actually meant to be a traditional military win. Iranian leadership fully expected up to 90% of those weapons to be intercepted by air defenses. So why do it? Well, the real goal was to shatter the old paper tiger illusion. For decades, the narrative was that they only make empty threats, right? By launching this massive barrage, the strategy was to permanently break that psychological barrier. And the analysis notes, once that image of hesitation is broken, you literally can't put it back together.
Moving on to part 2, economic and invisible war.
This brings us to a frankly staggering financial reality of modern warfare. While the successful interceptions were widely celebrated as a huge defensive win, the source points out a totally different angle. The defense, Israel and his allies, spent over $1 billion in a single night. But the attack itself, it only cost Iran a mere $10 to $15 million to launch. Think about that multiplier. You're forcing your opponent to spend roughly 100 times more, or conservatively, at least 10 times more system-wide. The source argues this proves the real war is about severe economic attrition. It's like, why destroy a city if you can just quietly exhaust your enemy's bank account? And this invisible war is happening everywhere, not just in the sky. We're talking relentless cyber attacks hitting banking and port infrastructure. The mass export of cheap, highly effective Shahed drone tech, which basically turns asymmetric warfare into an off-the-shelf commodity. Plus, the constant looming threat over the Strait of Hormuz. Just the threat alone spikes global oil markets, effectively raising gas prices for all of us, without a single shot actually being fired.
All right, part 3, the net of the shadow army.
According to the analysis, Iran's biggest military advantage is that they almost never fight directly. Instead, they use what's called the resistance axis. This is a massive, decentralized network of regional proxy forces put together over years by the late commander Qasem Soleimani. The wild part? The source emphasizes that even years after his 2020 assassination, this ghost network is still operating exactly as he designed it. And the geographic strategy here is incredibly clear. It's a multi-front trap. Israel is fighting Hamas in the south, while Hezbollah's rockets turn the northern border into a burning, evacuated zone. Throw in militias in Iraq to the east, and Houthi rebels in Yemen to the west. It's a completely coordinated ring of pressure. And yet not one Iranian soldier is officially on the battlefield. This proxy net even snags global trade. Look at the Houthis in Yemen. The source outlines how they've turned the Red Sea into a totally asymmetric naval battlefield. By firing really cheap missiles at giant cargo ships, they've literally forced global shipping to detour thousands of miles around Africa. Suez Canal traffic plummets, global freight costs skyrocket, and yeah, that eventually drives up the cost of everyday goods at your local store. It's maximum global disruption achieved through minimal direct investment. Next up, part 4, diplomacy and silent support. There's this really fascinating concept in the source regarding the nuclear program after the US left the 2018 deal. With their accelerated uranium enrichment, they've built what the analysis calls Schrodinger's weapon. It's a psychological shield. Do they have a bomb? Are they just weeks away? That mere uncertainty completely changes the strategic math. I mean, nobody wants to launch a full-scale invasion if they don't know exactly what's waiting behind door number 1. And this deliberate ambiguity is backed up by some very quiet, very powerful friends. The analysis breaks down a clear 3-step alliance system. 1, Russia steps in to supply advanced military tech. 2, China completely ignores Western sanctions and buys massive amounts of Iranian oil, keeping the economy afloat.
And 3, maybe the most crucial, both of those superpowers use their UN Security Council vetoes to act as an impenetrable diplomatic shield. We saw this diplomatic strategy peak in 2023 when China actually brokered a historic peace deal between bitter rivals Saudi Arabia and Iran. The source frames this as a massive blow to U.S. influence in the region. By just using strategic patience, Iran basically ended its own geopolitical isolation, literally shaking hands with the very neighbors the West had relied on to contain them. That takes us to part 5, the shifting tide of public opinion. Here the source highlights a really profound narrative flip. The intense conflict in Gaza sparked mass student protests, especially on U.S. college campuses, triggered massive debates across European parliaments, and led to South Africa's landmark ICJ lawsuit against Israel. In a totally unexpected twist, the heavily sanctioned Iranian state suddenly found itself positioned as a sort of global voice of resistance for huge segments of the public worldwide. And compounding all of this, American fatigue. People are just exhausted. The U.S. public is fundamentally drained by decades of wars in the Middle East. The source argues that the costly legacies of Iraq and Afghanistan act as a massive political deterrent. Iranian strategists supposedly know that for any U.S. administration, starting a brand new direct war in the Middle East would be absolutely politically suicidal. Finally, part 6, time, the greatest strategic weapon. If you really want to understand the overarching philosophy driving Iranian leadership, just consider the scale. The source argues that Ayatollah Khamenei isn't looking at 4-year election cycles or even decades. He's looking at civilizational millennia. The modern state of Israel is roughly 75 years old. The U.S., a little over 2 centuries. But Persian civilization, that stretches back over 2.5 millennia. So, the analysis concludes that the core strategy isn't about some swift, decisive military victory. It's simply endurance. It's about staying on your feet, surviving the sanctions, absorbing the strikes, and patiently waiting while your opponents slowly fracture under the weight of their own political fatigue, economic drain, and shifting global attention. As we wrap up this explainer, this really dense 14-point thesis leaves us with a profound question to consider. In the modern era, who actually wins a shadow war? Is it the side with the most advanced billion-dollar weapon systems, or is it the side with the civilizational patience to simply outlast everyone else? It completely changes how we think about modern conflict. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.